So imagine like you're standing in the middle, and on both sides of you is a timeline of your past and then a timeline of your future. And so imagine now that as you have this timeline of the past, if you're thinking about the past, it can't help but then become your future.
I believe that each and every one of us has the power within ourselves to create the life that we really want. And I want to help give you the tools to make that happen. I'm Danica Patrick, and I'm pretty intense.
So this is my first attempt here at a solo episode. And, I've been thinking a lot about, it's funny, I didn't put this on the list. So I want to go through my 20 lessons of 2020. This is me being vulnerable. And that's actually a word I've been thinking about a lot this year, is the difference between transparency and vulnerability. And I think that we all have different ranges for that. So, I would call myself someone that has a large amount of transparency. Like there's a lot about myself and what I'm willing to share that I'm very comfortable with. I just don't care. And then there's like, it takes to pretty far along the line till I get to the vulnerable spot where I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready to talk about that. So to me, this is actually me being vulnerable because it's not something very planned out. And let's face it, lessons are never easy. So, and with my ability to go on and on, we'll just see what comes out. So, okay, so let's have at it. So these are in no particular order. I was trying to number them in an order, but it's hard and one kind of flows into the next sometimes. So I just drew a line through halfway and we're just going to do the first 10. So, 20 through 11. Lesson number 20. So intuition is real. This is a lesson this year that I've learned, we all have those feelings, right? We have those intuitions, we have those feelings about something and we're worried about it. And here's the thing. I feel like we tend to go into the ones that feel good and follow them and run with them. But the ones that feel bad or concerning or that you kind of don't want to admit, I tend to use my mind and go, that's not real. Or like, that's the worst thing I could tell myself. That's probably not true. And then, through life, we find out that these things are at times. And so, I know this is something that we've all heard so many times, but it probably can't be reiterated enough, is that I do believe we have an inner compass. We have like an inner lie detector system. Our soul knows the answer. Our higher self is trying to communicate with us. And it's really about getting good at hearing the no's and the concerns and the red flags, as much as you're getting those intuitions about like, oh, I think I should take this job. I should move to that house. I should do this or that. Like those are easy. It's the ones that you don't want to hear that you need to listen to as well. And so for me this year, it's been learning that and learning it through difficult things that, you just have to admit. And, it's a shortcut, right? Just take the information. And it's on the other end of it. If somebody is willing to be receptive to it and participate in the confrontation or in the change or whatever it may be, then it's you've got the right people around you. Because the people that want you to stay the same are in a relationship with that old self and that old dynamic. So don't let that be your guide. Okay, number 19. No one holds the keys to your life. So this came through, having heartbreak and going home and back to Indiana for a few months this summer. And I was realizing some patterns in my life and in relationships. And so I was looking for my parents to help sort of clarify those and like help fix those and apologize or, explain something. And, that was somehow going to resolve these issues, and that I needed participation from someone to alchemize the situation and to heal it. And, my therapist said one day on our call, she said at the end of it, no one holds any keys for you. And I was like, oh, and I kind of started crying, and I was like, wow, that's that's a big responsibility. And she said, it is, but you don't have to do it alone. Like, you have people that are here. I'm here for you. There are people here for you, but you getting to a better place with situations, like no one is going to just, open that door or close another. It's going to come from you. And that no one holds the keys. And I was like, wow. And so a lot of this year has been about responsibility, accountability for myself and how I feel. And so that was one of them. Really, really a big one that day. It was like, no one holds any keys for you. I'm like, oh, why not? Okay. Number 18. I won't starve to death if I don't eat. Isn't that funny that I have to like have that or even write that down? Those who know me know I'm like super into food, and I always have to have food around. And early this year, in probably it was February, I had just gotten back to California, and like it was like, okay, let's do a little fast. And so I decided to do one day, which turned into 36 hours. Cause you've got the night before in the morning and like the nights between the day. So I called it 36 hours of just water. And what I realized was that, that my hunger would go in waves. Like it would, every few hours, I'd have a 45-minute hunger spike. And after 45 minutes, it would just go away. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then also knowing, like, sort of debunking the ideas about like, you'll slow your metabolism down if you don't eat. At the end of the day, my good friend Jordan Saya would say it. I interviewed him for my podcast. It's just calories in versus calories out. These things are not true. And that, and no one didn't lose weight because they didn't eat frequently enough. Right. So it's just a math problem. Calorie deficit always wins if you want to lose weight. But anyway, the big point about this is I won't starve to death if I don't eat. And so it doesn't actually get worse. You just have to ride that really punishing wave. Okay. Number 17, how to allow help is actually you loving yourself and saying you're worthy of love. So something I think that especially for women, because we tend to be, fixers and don't ask for help. But I think people in general, guys don't like to ask for directions, right? So I guess we all have our thing. But I found myself this summer being in such a position of sadness that I had to have people help me. I had to have people hold me up. I had to allow people to take care of me and to help raise my energy. And exhaust them. And I knew I was, but it was necessary, and I couldn't do it on my own. And so, and let's face it, think about when someone asks you for help, and this is just like flipping the dynamic. It makes you feel really good. Like when someone says, can you help me with this? A lot of times you're like, sure. And it's an honor, and, it's a form of respect. And so really also what it comes down to too, is you believing that you're worthy of that. You're worthy of someone helping you. You're worthy of someone sacrificing for you. And so I had to do a lot of that this year. And it really showed me how much people loved me, even if I didn't do anything. And even if I was draining on them. Like there's a season for everything. And that you don't always have to be in a state of giving to keep a relationship going. You can receive too. And so it was kind of me saying that I'm worthy of this sacrifice from someone. Number 16, how to be the observer. This is a little bit more of a complicated concept, but the observer is essentially being able to look past people's projections and see the true self. So what made me realize it was I went home, like I said, to Indiana, and I lived with my parents for 3 months. And when I was there, I was getting pulled into these old dynamics. And this is what happens, right? When we're with our family, we kind of get pulled into these old patterns and dynamics. And so, I remember there was something where I made a comment, and then my mom went and told my dad about it afterwards. And it was like, felt like I was getting ganged up on. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then something happened with my mom, and my dad came to her defense and was like, I think what your mom is trying to say. And I realized like I was getting pulled into these dynamics and like quipping back and getting defensive a little bit. It just didn't feel good either. And so as I'm shifting, I'm sort of recognizing in these two instances, because again, I'm immersed in it because I'm home. I'm recognizing this like incredible, like highly operating and functioning codependency system where they protect each other. And that's fine. It totally works. But I realized that my participation in it and how, I didn't need to. It was their dynamic, and it wasn't about me. It was about them. And it was, I didn't need to get pulled into the energetics of it and to that old sort of defensiveness or protecting myself or justifying. And so being the observer is essentially being able to look above the situation and being able to see the dynamic playing out that has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you. That's just their way of operating. And so through that experience, I was then able to do a much better job the rest of the time. I'm able to be in this space a lot more. When I see someone get triggered or project, or shoot, even if I get triggered and I'm starting to see how we are not our wounds, essentially, is the end of it. When someone has a reaction, they're being triggered into their wounds, and they are not their wounds. They, at a soul level, are whole and wonderful and beautiful and love. And everybody at the core wants the same thing, right? Everybody wants to be happy and joyful. And so anything outside of that is not them. It is a wound. It is a trigger. And it is something that happened to them at some point in their life where they're affected. So basically you have an instance happen that you then get a feeling from. So say there's some big trauma, say you got yelled at a lot as a kid. And so then you create this feeling in your body as a response to say, oh my God, that didn't feel good. I'm like maybe you're a kid and you're anxious and you're scared. And so anytime someone starts yelling, you go back into that moment. It's like it marks that point in time. And so every event draws you back to that emotional moment. And you get triggered. And that's why people act like kids sometimes. That's why they act immature. That's why they run away. They can't talk. Or they yell, right? So you learn your patterning from like what happened in that moment. And so I just learned how to be the observer of situations and to see people's protective layer as nothing that has to do with me. It's not personal. Almost everything that happens in life is really not about you. However, everybody is giving you an indication of yourself. That's for another idea. Number 15, I learned how to feel my feelings. So a practice that was given to me earlier this year was to stop sporadically through the day. It was actually told me do it every hour, and like put your hand on your body and just kind of close your eyes and feel like, what are you actually feeling? Is it tightness? Is it Is it anxiety? Is it sadness? Is it like, what are you feeling? And so I learned to, I started doing that, and then, it's pretty much been waterworks since then. So I actually had to choose my word after this summer. I was like, I think I'm moving on from the word feel, and I'm moving into feel joy. So I had to re-clarify to the universe what I wanted. But feelings are so important, and they really are, they're an elevated awareness to situations. And so some people are better at it than others. But I was not that great at feeling my feelings and slowing. It really involves slowing down. And I've done everything in my life so fast. And so I don't even like it when somebody takes a while to answer, like, do you want water? And they think about it. I'm like, just, I don't know, say the first word that comes to mind. So just slowing down and allowing that pause that gives you more perspective to the situation. So feel your feelings. Number 14, investing in friends. I had this great conversation with some friends on a hike, and it was about lessons that had been learned in life. And one of them was just the value of investing into friends. And so that kind of stuck with me. And I'd say that this year, especially with everything that went on, and and leaning on people, there was just a lot of checking in, a lot of phone calls, and so I recognized just how much was given to me. And so, you know, there's a season for everything. And so some people have needed that reciprocal love and attention, that maybe in the past I wasn't as good at making space for. So it actually plays into feeling the feelings and feeling for people, but investing into friends, investing into these relationships that are investing into you. And I would say that I have a lot of friends, but I maybe didn't, and like I tend to have a lot of deep friendships, or I have a few deep friendships, and I don't really nurture the rest of them as much. But I would say this year I've done a much better job of really checking in and asking how other people are doing, a lot more. And so, and what comes back is just more love. When you show love, you get the love. And so, investing into friends, making time. Sometimes it's a sacrifice, right? But guess what? Sometimes it's a sacrifice what they've done for you too. If you're, you know, calling bitching about something happening in your life, they might be busy, but they're making that time. And so it's about making time for them too. And what you water grows. So I feel like I've had a lot of friendships that have really, really grown and deepened even more. So investing into friends. Number 13, meditation is medication. So I use the analogy of a roller coaster for meditation, and that it's like you're at the bottom and you're clicking up to go to the top of the first drop. And by the end of the day, you get pretty close. But the meditation element to life kind of resets your roller coaster. And so if you don't do it enough, then, inevitably you kind of come out the other side of it, and you're on the downslide, and then you're just hanging on for dear life, and you're on an emotional roller coaster. And you're just kind of like, you need a reset. And you're on this ride, just holding on for dear life instead of controlling it, instead of having patience and being able to pause. There's no pause when you're, flipping upside down on a ride, right? So, meditation has been something that I've finally done on a regular basis for probably, I started in maybe June, late June, I finally started. So it's been a really beautiful time. Sometimes I have all kinds of different rituals in it. I'll pull cards, I'll burn certain things, I'll have certain oils, I will meditate, I will do breathing exercises, I will do soul dialoguing either in my head or on paper and journal. Sometimes I journal. So again, it's about kind of a dedicated space and practice to, uh, resetting, getting things out, and clearing your mind. It's an emotional reset. So I think there's even some science behind the chemicals when you do enough of this. It's like natural Valium. So if that is something of interest to people, maybe start meditating. Okay, number 12. Boundaries and what the hell they are. Okay, so I always thought that boundaries were something that was for other people to you. And instead, what I've learned is that boundaries are for yourself in relationship to others. So it's not about don't cheat on me. It's not about don't lie to me. It's not about don't steal from me. It's about your own boundaries that help you navigate relationships and which ones you should be in and not in, and what you're willing to put up with and what you're not. So there also is a layer of needing enough self-worth to create them. You need to believe that you're worth those boundaries more. You are worth more. You are the most valuable element in the situation. And if you have to honor yourself enough to stick with those boundaries. And in response, what happens is that you get people that honor those. You get it in the same in return. If you don't have boundaries, then there's nothing to follow. They don't treat you the way that you want to be treated. So boundaries are they're just something I just never had. And so I realized that I needed to be alone to learn them. I needed to understand what I was worth, what I was willing to put up with, and just how I wanted to feel, and getting control of your own energy and how you feel without interference. To know where home base is. How many people out there don't really know what their home base is? How they feel emotionally when there's nothing pulling, nothing pushing, nothing poking. I think that's really hard. And I can absolutely understand how hard it is. Life gets to you, family, friends, children. I mean, some of these I have, some of them I don't. But life keeps happening. And so understanding who you are at your core without anything else has been super important for me. So yeah. And just that element of boundaries being something that I have for other people versus I have for other people, something that they need to not do. It's something that I need to not do. I need to know when to walk away from a situation because it's not me staying in integrity to myself and what I feel like I deserve. Okay. And number 11. This is honestly number 1 overall, but based on just drawing a line here and reading these off. And so of course I reversed my top 10 because I was like, well, let's at least make this the last one I do, but this has been the biggest one. So the pattern that I was trying to understand was being in relationships where I wasn't chosen. And, that had happened in the last 2. And I was like, okay, I don't need a third to create a pattern here. I've done this has happened twice. Someone doesn't choose me. What is the problem? I am a common denominator. And so what I realized was that the lesson was that I was supposed to choose myself. So the lesson in wanting someone to choose me is that I was supposed to be choosing myself. I'm a fixer. And I came home and I was like, I ended up learning that, I didn't remember a lot from my childhood. I don't know why, but, my first 10 years, I don't remember a ton. And so one thing I learned about that was that I dad worked a lot. And so he was gone during the week, and just on the weekends, he'd be home. And a kid doesn't know that this is all for the right reasons. They just don't know consistency. And so it creates an abandonment wound where they're afraid of being abandoned. And so, you're a kid, you don't know what's going on. So that began, which is an anxious attachment style, because you're afraid of being abandoned. So you're anxious that someone's going to leave. And then when I started remembering things was when I was about 10, and that's when I started racing. And so we go to the racetrack, and, I love my father, and I've probably got, honestly, he's responsible for so many wonderful aspects of me, but he would yell at me. I found out pretty much every weekend. And so then I said to Mom, what do we do to fix that? And she said, we gave in. And I was like, oh. And it was like, I realized then I'm a fixer because of that. Like, how did I keep my dad around? Because I was afraid that he was going to leave, because I was afraid of being abandoned. I fixed things. So now in every relationship, I don't want them to leave. So I fix things. And you lose yourself. You lose your sense of self. You lose your sort of autonomy as a person. And there are no boundaries then. So in that, I realized the dynamics that made me not choose myself. And so all of that effort that I put in to someone else, I now realized was meant for me. And so honestly, that is the greatest lesson of 2020 for me, is that, and this is why everyone is showing you something about yourself. When I wasn't chosen, the message is you're not choosing yourself. It's like, we're going to get into some of the other things that get into aspects of this concept a little deeper, but everything is a mirror for us. And that's a complicated concept. But maybe by the end of these 20 things, there'll be a bit more of an understanding for some of what that is. But something that I wanted, I needed to give to myself. Because again, going back to one of these other ones, no one holds the keys. Like, no one holds the keys for this yearning that you have. So you have to give it to yourself. So that's 20 through 11, and we'll be back next week for 10 through 1 of the top 20 lessons of 2020. We're back for the second part of my top 20 lessons of 2020. Probably could be 100 deep, but I came up with the top 20. Last week was number 20 down to 11. And this week we're going to go 10 down to 1. And the thing is, I was trying to put them in order, but honestly, it's very difficult. They have their significance. They climb to the top at different points in time of when you need them. So I don't know. They're out of order. They're no particular order at all. But they are all significant lessons. So let's get into it. Okay, number 10, the power of cold water. I interviewed Wim Hof this year, and one thing that I have realized, that I got maybe it's a little more conscious now, is that I'm fairly brave, but there are some things that are issues, like as blocks or things I don't go towards. And one of them is sure as hell cold water. So I thought, this is probably something I should lean into. And he says a cold shower a day keeps the doctor away. So, especially in 2020, isn't that something we all want to do? So I've started taking cold showers ever since I interviewed him, and my pool at the house is really, really cold. So in the non-summertime in Arizona, it's down into the 50s, and so I've been using that as my cold plunge. But I guess there's two parts of it. One is the sort of internal benefits that it creates that are like not seen, essentially, if it ups your resilience to um, viruses and things like that. But mood and skin and all kinds of various other things. But the other one is just leaning into the difficulty and expanding my own comfort zone of being uncomfortable, which is kind of the name of the game for me. So anyway, cold water. It's been something that I have realized I can do now. So hell yeah, me. Number 9. I didn't realize how easygoing I was until I was single. Um, I've always been a really go with the flow person, but I also am strong. So I guess what I've realized is that maybe my like triggers got in the way and things like that that would make me feel like I had like kind of put me or more on edge, and maybe created some resistance or less easy breezy flowiness. Even though I'm always up for anything, maybe my mood wasn't exactly there, but I am friggin' easy breezy. Like I'm up for anything, and I just don't have any more bad days anymore. And I'm super grateful to recognize that in myself, because as I've been in relationships for 16 years straight, pretty much, I kind of didn't know where I was in all that. Am I easygoing? Am I not? Am I too uptight? Am I too controlling? Am I too opinionated? Am I too easygoing? Do I not stand up for myself enough? Like, where did I fall in all that? So I feel like it's shown me. Okay, number 8. I also didn't know how good at being alone I was until I was alone. This goes towards this is maybe not necessarily like a super fundamental lesson as much as it's sort of taught me about myself. So it has been, it's not like get in the cold water, and that could apply to anyone, but this is a lesson I've learned in myself, and that a lesson in confidence and to not fear the unknown. And again, like I had just said, I hadn't been alone in 16 years, so I didn't know how to do it. And what I realized is that I'm really, really good at it, and it's not a problem, and it's very comfortable. And I'm like, oh man, I kind of like my space now. So I'm sure that, in the future, that could change. But for now, I've realized how good at being alone I am. And it's always a space that even when I was living in North Carolina, I described that as a time where I really learned a lot about myself too, because I spent a lot of time alone there. I did have some space there for sure, and especially space as in land. So, but I realized in sort of the quiet days, not moments, but days, what do I want to do if I could do anything? And it's in those spaces where you start to learn and figure out what it is that you actually want to do. There's so much of the time that we end up conforming and shape shifting and compromising and giving up ourself to appease others. And I mean, I get it. It's hard because, I also find joy in making someone else happy. So it's a fine line. But it's in being alone that you really learn who you are. And I'm grateful for that. Number 7, the memories of the past keep us hooked into repeating the same thing in the future. So this is sort of like a reframing of karma. And it's that, imagine, because I'm pretty visual. So imagine like you're standing in the middle, and on both sides of you is a timeline of your past and then a timeline of your future. And so imagine now that as you have this timeline of the past, if you're thinking about the past, it can't help but then become your future. You're not thinking about anything else. And so it is in letting go and sort of allowing yourself to think greater than those memories, or think different than those memories about what it is that you want, that you can then create the new future. Otherwise, as you think about the past, you create them in the future, and then what are you on? The karmic wheel. I was like, oh man, that was just such a good clarifying visual of how we keep creating our future by thinking thoughts of the past. Got to get beyond yourself, as my friend Joe Dispenza would say. Okay, number 6. This one's tough. Everyone is reflecting back to you who you are and what needs healing. I mean, this is a big concept. It's a concept of mirroring. And, but, you know, as we sort of walk through life and we get triggered, that trigger is just showing us something that's unhealed in ourselves, but it's being shown to us through that person. So like, for instance, I would say that something I judge in people is that like if they're lazy, let's say, but it's because, and so I'm going to pull in number 5, because number 5 actually in this list is what we judge is what we deny in ourselves. So in this reflection and this sort of understanding of the judgment then that comes in because we're triggered, what it's really showing us is something that we deny in ourselves. And that, for me, in that specific example, let's say, of judging someone that's lazy, it's because I deny myself the ability to be lazy. So if someone is being lazy, I'm triggered because it's an aspect of myself that I deny and that needs healing and needs balancing. So yeah, looking at the people in your life, especially the closest ones to you, and especially in relationships, what is it that's triggering you, and looking at that trigger as a teacher. And that's really the truth. Because as we've healed that aspect, let's fast forward to a place where I now have a really healthy balance with resting and being what I would maybe label as lazy, but let's just call it resting and recovering and healing and, whatever, resting. Then if I do that with myself, now if somebody else is doing that, I can see the aspect that they may need that. That might be exactly what they need right now. And now I'm healed and I'm not triggered by it. So you can see how if somebody does something that you judge, there's work to be done. That's been a really helpful teacher for me, because it is hard, right? You're just you don't, it's hard to really see yourself. So that's why the world shows up as a mirror to show us ourselves. So we know where to look, where are the weaknesses, where are the wounds, and then we can go to work on them, because we as an eye don't, it's hard to see those things within ourselves. So it's the people that provide the mirror. So lovingly, of course. Number 4 on the top 20 countdown of lessons is the body holds emotions and trauma, and the mind is part of that puzzle. So the body holds emotions and trauma. I started doing I've actually, always had massages, but I started getting into sort of a new aspect of body work. She was working on my back, and she was going after the spot, and it just wasn't going away. And she said to me, if this spot had a sound, what would it be? Give the spot a sound. And I was like, okay. I don't know what that means. But I was like, all right. So you kind of laying there, and as she's, working, I'm like, I let out like this, and it's so uncomfortable, right? It's such an odd thing. And so I kind of let it out, and it wasn't really maybe authentic. And then the next time I did was much more like, it was like I couldn't control it. It just kind of came out, and much more of it. And after I did that, I started crying. I started bawling. And I was like, wow, that was the craziest thing, to have sort of this frequency, essentially, the sound, activate this wound in me, and this stuck energy. And so I've since then gone more times, and it happens again and again. It doesn't I don't go in with the expectation of it. In fact, the last time it didn't cry, but I definitely had a lot of information come through different in different parts of the body. But understanding this idea that when we have an experience that is strong enough to create an emotion, a feeling, that if you don't get rid of that through saying it, processing it, therapy, or talking to the person, or whoever or whatever the moment was, and you just keep it inside, that it's stuck. And it's stuck as in, like, I imagine, and again, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, I just kind of use my imagination for how to process the crap in my life, but I kind of imagine it as being like balls of energy that are just stuck in my body. And the sound is like the door to the emotion. And I also experienced this with another practice that I have, which is um, this class called The Class, and it's with Taryn Toomey, and she started doing this a long time ago in New York. And obviously with everything going on, they have a digital platform and an app now, so it's easy. So I just put it on my computer and do it. But these are 45 minutes to an hour long, and it's moving around to music, like you have a repetitious move, and then there's some sort of verbal prompting, and then you're also getting audible. So you're sort of making sounds. And I really feel like this is the sound, the vibration, the frequency, like, opens up these wounds. It's like a door, and all of a sudden out flooding comes the emotion. And so I think that maybe some people can identify with the idea that, when you say things out loud, that there is a charge to them. It's like, if you have an issue with somebody, your voice starts to shake when you tell them, or something that you're scared of, and you tell someone that you love, and all of a sudden you start crying, and you can't hold it back, or you're trying to. There's more there. And it's like, I think that it's so important that we start to all, including myself, which has been such a process this year, but I'm feeling much better about it all. In fact, like a good cry now, but get more in touch with those feelings and the processing of it, and letting yourself get emotional. Dare I say, I actually like having a good cry now. It feels good. It feels clearing. I also think, is just an expansion on this concept and idea, is that here in 2020, we're just in an era where, especially for men, it's being asked to show up in that way. It's being asked to feel your feelings, and to get in touch with them, and to balance out, your masculine and feminine side, as well as for women and their masculine and feminine. But I think that in emotions and feeling is being called right now, and feeling into your body. And I know it's not comfortable, but I will say that in doing it, you find comfort in the discomfort. It becomes more familiar. It's like it's a teacher. It's a friend. It's a teacher. But I think that that's what's being asked of us this year, but especially for men, to feel those feelings, communicate, cry. Okay. Number 3 on the list. Everyone has childhood trauma. Boom. I said it. It's true. I had a great childhood. I love my parents. They're wonderful human beings. And it doesn't mean, though, that there aren't things that happened that I didn't need to deal with later on. It's like quite simply this, you're going to love them. You're going to love your kids too much or too little, one or the other, right? I mean, it's hard. You can't nail that. You can't nail it. And, you can definitely give them tools, though. I think that's definitely something you can do. But basically, I feel like this whole idea that everyone has childhood trauma, I think that maybe trauma is the word that needs to be sort of understood in a much more acceptable way. Like, I remember when I went home for the summer, that when I said the word trauma, it triggers. Like, it sounds horrible. It's like, your arm didn't get cut off, did it? You didn't, these horrible things didn't happen. You got, 10 fingers, 10 toes. You're well, it's like trauma is not like a car accident. Trauma just means that something happened in your reality that was big enough for you to create an emotion as a result. It didn't just sort of come in your mind and out. It didn't just sort of have a flow in and out. It sat in you. It sunk in. It took root. And that's a trauma. We all have them, wounds, whatever you want to call them. And the quicker that we admit that there's unpacking that can and should need to be done with the patterning of, how we were raised. And that's just it, is it's like, do you love your patterns? And that's what I was asking the question of. It's like, do I like this pattern? And if I don't, how do I fix it? And it's in that exploration of the root cause of the pattern, which is almost always going to lead you back to childhood, that you can find it. So true healing comes from pulling it out by the root, not by band-aiding it, not by, showing up at your therapist as a couple and going like, okay, well, tell her how you feel and tell him, it's like, that's a band-aid, right? Get out of there. You go see your own person. You go see your own person, and everybody like, you get down to it for yourself. Heal yourself to heal your relationships, all of them. Again, pulling other aspects of what I've learned in to pull back in those aspects of like, what am I judging? What triggers me? To heal yourself so that you're not in that space anymore. You have more good days. Okay, number 2. Okay, number 2 and number 1 are again, they're not in particular order, but I am saving sort of bigger concepts for the very end here, as I did in the last episode. So bear with me. There's an idea that if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that these are concepts that I could probably work on for the rest of my life. So I'm going to try and do the best I can to explain and explore these ideas that might be meaningful to you, or might make you just get to thinking and what your relationship is with them. But okay, number 2, duality is part of the whole. Okay, so it's this idea, like if someone were to ask me what I thought that we are here to, as humans, experience, I would say that is to experience duality. But the goal or the idea is to end up being able to have oneness, which is more towards, enlightenment. When you are connected wholly to everything, oneness. So in my year, as for many, it's been a lot has happened, and it's created an expansion of my own experiences. So it's like as if I'm inside of this bubble, inside of this circle, but I'm isolated to the middle. Like I haven't experienced enough outside of my little area to recognize that they're all inside the bubble, as in the whole. So this year I've had more expanding experiences into deep, deep sadness and brokenheartedness and confusion and lack of self-worth and lack of purpose and all kinds of, really, really hard aspects. But then on the other hand, what's been beautiful is experiencing joy at a sporadic moment, doing next to nothing, just sort of being. And whether it's like being in nature or being in my house or being with myself, or just like, I don't know, it's like a wave that comes over me of just like feeling this joy of like, so it's hard to put it into words, but just feeling perfect in the moment. And And so I've experienced this sort of more the center of this bubble is expanding and growing, and I'm getting towards those edges more, closer and closer and closer. And in it, recognizing that all these other people that I might not have been able to relate to in certain emotions or experiences, now I have now experienced them. So again, it's showing me that in this duality, it's part of the whole, like, and that we're all part of that same thing. As I've experienced more aspects, it's allowed me to relate to more people, which means that, we're not that different. And so it's in this duality that I exist in both, right? I exist in grief and I exist in joy, and it's all part of the whole. Like, it's all there. It's one end of the spectrum. It's just, it's about finding sort of the balance of where you want to be in the middle of it. It's why, people go to extremes. It's just touching the edges of this, and finding yourself, and that you're all of it. You're right. Like, I know I'm rambling on, but again, like I said, bear with me, because these are concepts that are kind of new to me, but the simplistic words of it is just that within duality, you exist on both ends of the spectrum. And so that is helping me understand oneness by expanding my experiences. Okay, now we're going to land at number 1 on my top 20 lessons of 2020. So this is even more complicated to explain, but maybe I can be concise. So it's the idea that we're all divine. We are all God. And before I lose anybody too much, let's get talking, because it's triggering, I think. This idea, especially when it comes to religion, is like it's blasphemous or uncomfortable. And I'd ask, what is the discomfort in that? Is the discomfort that now you recognize your power, that you recognize what you could be? And so the thing that's got me to understand this or think this is the idea that, and I listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks. I don't know if anybody else does, but if you don't, I love listening to Abraham Hicks. She is, her real name is Esther Hicks, but Abraham is who she channels. So it's channeled information. But there's a lot of talk about feeling good, and sort of, if something doesn't feel good, then, it's out of resonance. It's not on your frequency. It's not meant for you. And so, if we're to sort of use that as an indicator, God is love. I feel like that's something that most everyone can agree on. And if God is love, love is whole and happy and pure and joyful. And it's all those really good feelings. So now, if you experience something, anger, mad, triggers, whatever, it doesn't feel good, right? Why doesn't it feel good? It's because it's really not you at your core. It's just like when you look at someone and like your kids, maybe, and you just see them past all of their issues. You see them past their, hating you, right? I hate you, mom. Or, not wanting to be around you, or whatever it is, or something that they do or say. And you just still love them because you see them for who you see their essence, their true self. You can sort of feel the divinity within them. And anything else is just not really them. It's an adolescence. It's growing pains. It's whatever, but it's not really them. It's part of the learning experience. And so, like, let's just sort of extrapolate that out to everything. It's that if it doesn't make you feel good, if it makes you uncomfortable, if it makes you feel shameful, if it makes you feel angry, regretful, any of those kinds of things, it's really not you at your core. And so for me, that's what I've sort of been exploring into, is like, man, how can I love someone better? It's like, I have this example, this story. about being in my neighborhood and out walking my dogs. And this guy was mad about my dogs being off their leash. And he's like, hey, they should be on a leash. And I don't really like to put them on leashes, even though they have an electric collar. I was like, hey, I have them on an electric collar if that makes you feel better. And then another day I was walking, and as I'm sort of wrapping around back to the house, and they're off the leashes, and I can see him looking at me. And I sort of energetically give this whole, like, what are you looking at? Like, they're fine. And he's looking at me with this energy of, of like, your dogs are off leashes and I'm watching you. And so I get back to the house, and the next day my house manager shows up and she goes, so got a call from the homeowners. And I said, dogs off leash. And she goes, yeah. And I was like, I know who it was. So anyway, within probably a week of that, I went out I was out running with my dog and doing some short interval running things. And I wasn't going very far, but he was out. There was a guy outside walking. And I thought, I'll run on this side of the street, and then we go by and turn around. And I was like, could this be the guy down the street or not? I had that feeling. And then I was like, I don't know. He seemed like he wasn't very happy. He probably is not out for a nature walk then. And so I went by, and I turned around because I was just running like a 400-meter run. And I turned around, and I could see he was right behind me now. And he has his phone out as if he was sort of like held it up, sort of like as if he was taking a picture, and then put it back down. So I turned around and I stopped and I looked at him, but interjecting this information from when I heard that there was a report to the homeowners, to this moment, I kept thinking to myself, you know what? Don't fight this. Like, just don't fight this. How can I love this human better? If it is that important for him to have the dogs on leash, which seems, and call the homeowners, like, he has bigger issues and I don't know what they are, but I'm going to just try and see how I can love this human better. And so I'm like, I'll put him on leashes from now on, and I'm going to smile at him, right? Like, I'm going to smile at him, say hi, and at least he can go, well, she seems pretty nice. I guess maybe I overreacted. I don't know. So now going back to the moment when I turned around and saw him. I stopped and I looked at him and I was like, hi, my name is Danica. I was like, what's your name? And he's like, oh, so-and-so. And I said, well, where do you live? And he said, oh, I live down the street. And sure enough, it's the house. And I was like, you're the guy. I'm like, you're the one that was uncomfortable with my dogs off the leash. I said, I just want you to know that whenever I go by now, I put them on leashes. And it's true. It's just that I wasn't going that far because I was running a short distance. So I was turning around. But when I go by, I put them on leashes. I was like, I just want you to know, I have no problem with that. It's okay. He's like, oh, it's just, my dogs, they're just they bark a lot. And, I love dogs. And I said, yeah, that's okay. He's like, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And I said, yeah, it's not a problem. And, so anyway, we said bye and carried on. And, that picture, as I think he took a picture of me with my dog not on a leash when I was running, nothing happened with it. And sure enough, now it's like a wave hello, like, oh, nice to see you. And all I did was think to myself, how could I love this human better? And that's how, if we're going to pull religion back in, that's how kind of God sees everything. It sees everything whole, pure, and love, always forgiving. And in fact, not even needing to forgive because there's no judgment. And so how can we love each other better? And it's like to see the divinity in each of us. And it's there. Like, how can I love this human better? How can I love it from that space of unconditional, pure love? How can I see the divinity? And anyway, it's given me a guidance system to my own emotions and the things that go on a day-to-day basis. It's like, if it makes me uncomfortable, it's just not me. It's not me at my core. And it's still something that I need to work on and heal. So, totally a work in progress, always working. But it's been a really transformative 2020. And, I'm going to share this. I had this revelation recently where I have always been, I'm grateful for my experiences. Yes. But the one that I had most recently, which is more of a growth, an evolution of that thought, is that I also wouldn't change anything. I think that's a really, for me, that's a big place to be, because it's been really hard. There's been a lot of things that have been challenging, and but I wouldn't change anything because it's led me to here. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for having 20 lessons of 2020 that I can share. And maybe hopefully some of them hit home. Maybe some of them will plant a seed. Maybe some of them will be an expansion of something that you've already been thinking about. And maybe you'll never listen to me again. I have no idea. And it's okay. It's all okay. We're all doing everything we can on the journey. And even when we or someone else that we care about is, seemingly off, it's all leading to truth. Even in sort of those derailing moments that people have and those detours, the truth always comes out, right? The truth about how someone feels, what you should be doing, where you should be, what's meant for you, it finds a way. And there's definitely one thing, is that the universe is persistent at you getting to a better place. And it comes sort of knocking softly, and then it breaks down the door, and then it burns your house down. So, say yes to the growth before your house has to burn down. But you know what? Sometimes it's just got to happen. And that's like extreme alchemy. And, it's transformative, and you can never be the same person, but in the best way. So I hope that everyone can look at 2020 and find the gems. And sometimes it's, it's like a diamond. It's through pressure it's made. And so I hope that people have been able to turn into diamonds this year through the pressure, and learn and grow and expand. But the journey's never over. It's never done. You can't get it. You can't get it wrong, and it's never done. It's just a journey. So here's to 2021 being maybe a journey that has just a little more joy in it. Yeah. And a little more freedom, and a little less masks. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.